I received no pay. In fact, I went in the hole because I had to buy my own film and do my own processing. In those days, of course, you'd have to run your film into Schmidt Photo. And what I recall most about it is I took the first issue's photos in black and white, obviously, and Schmidt ran them through the color processing, ruining them all. So I had to go back and duplicate the effort. My first editorial was critical of the sororities on campus. I was sitting at a table at student orientation, I guess, recruiting someone for some subversive organization I was belonging to, and there was a sorority group sitting next to me, and I noticed that young ladies would come up to apply, and then there would be a conference to the effect that, well, I don't know, her clothes aren't nice enough to be in this sorority, or she's not pretty enough to be in our sorority. So I reported that in the paper. That didn't go over very well.
I came to see Ann Humphrey, who was the Shield advisor at the time, and I just really liked Ann Humphrey. We just clicked right off the bat, and in the first interview she offered me sports editor's position, a photographer, some scholarship money, so I was just married. It was very important. And then said, and if that editor's position comes over, you're who we would want. So that happened in one meeting, and thought, that's where I'd like to go to school. Ann Humphrey was a great lady. She was very honest, very opinionated, very opinionated person. She didn't mind taking the paper and raking you over the coals, but it was all very constructive. But she was very straightforward, no nonsense, but I really liked her. She was also very compassionate, very caring, very personable. I remember we finished third in the state. I think Ball State won the journalism competition that year. We finished third in the state. I remember the political climate at the time in Evansville. It was Randy Shepard against Mike Vanderveer in one of the closely contested mayoral races in the history of the city. I don't think we I don't think we did any kind of support editorially, but it was kind of a hotbed of politics at the time. So, and that spread to the campus. There's no doubt that everybody knew who they were for in that mayoral race. We were challenging the University of Evansville to play us in basketball, and we could not get a basketball game. I remember we had a great sports editor, a great personality, a guy named Steve Costello. And Steve and I spent a lot of time together that year, and he was trying to get hold of U of E basketball coach, and of course he wouldn't grant an interview, he wouldn't return calls, and you know, I remember Steve kind of calling him out in the paper editorially, at least return a phone call, at least tell me why you won't play us in basketball. ISUE at the time was fighting for independence, and so we kind of became embroiled in that. We were asked to cover it as unbiased as you can, being a college editor. And so we editorially said, you know, we really need to be an independent campus. The cultures here is differently. Our vision for the future of this institution is different from what Indiana State's vision is for us. And so in the spring, it was kind of interesting. And again, Ann Humphrey was very opinionated about the direction that ISUE should go. She asked me to just at least call some of the players that were involved in making this decision. And I tried to call the president of Indiana State, talked to him for a little bit. And he said really the idea of independence was out of his hands. He said he really didn't have any influence over it, no control. And he talked about how it was a legislative decision, what happened to the legislature, and he had no influence. So I tracked down who the legislature was. It was a state representative, and I called him, and he said, oh my gosh, it's not in our control. If tomorrow the president of Indiana State said we want independence for ISUE, we would give it to him instantly. So that became a big lead story that, you know, there were I was hearing two versions of the story of why Indiana State would not let us go and let us be independent. So I think that was pretty controversial. And in the next issue, he wrote a scathing letter about whoever that clown was as the editor of the Shield, and who let him write whatever he thought was an opinion, and none of it was true. But it was all true. I quoted him verbatim.
While I started working at the student newspaper, I caught the journalism bug, got really interested in newspapering, and spent 16 years doing that as a reporter at the Evansville Courier and Press, and finished my career there as the Metro editor, where I supervised local news. Well, as the editor, one of the hardest things that we had was actually finding people who wanted to work at the Shield. So you had this product you had to put out every week, and you wanted it to be good, but you also realized that you had limited resources to do it. So we found creative inducements to try and get people to work at the Shield, saying, you know, we didn't have money to really induce them, so we'd just try to appeal to their ego and say, look, you can get a byline in the paper, and that worked to some degree. But what I remember most is just the quantity of work and the broad range of experience that we could get working, in journalism, even though it was just a student newspaper. In February of 1992, I was finishing my student career and walked by the University Center and saw on TV that there had been a plane crash at the Drury Inn. So my first inclination as a journalist was to grab a reporter who was in between classes, and we both got in my car and drove out to US 41 North to investigate, thinking this is big news, we don't know how it affects the university. Well, what happened is we found out later that while we were in the process of developing that story, that there had been two university instructors who were the sole survivors of the training seminar, and so we decided to put together a special issue just that night with reporting and photography. And I think that really kind of turned some attitudes about what student journalism could be, because we had a publication in the boxes here when people arrived to school the next day. And the one thing that I do regret as a student journalist, that late at night, deadlines are always the breaker of any good journalism. We found out that a USI student had been killed in the crash. And we got that on the back page of the newspaper that day. But of course, like all good journalists do, if you can't get the full facts today, then you follow up. And we continue to write and report about the effect that had on this university, and most importantly, the loss that we suffered from losing one of our own students. There were way too many nights when, a nice little conference table that we had in the center of the room, when you were working on the paper until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning to beat that deadline, that you thought, why just drive home or drive to the apartment? Let's just sleep here on the table. So, I'd sleep on the table. It was just crazy. It was crazy the amount of hours that you put in for, it was like $60 a month or something is what the Shield editor got paid. It was ridiculous, but it was more for experience and learning, and that's been something that I've carried throughout my entire career. When I worked for the Shield, it was all done manually. Everything was set by someone else on a linotype machine at the newspaper downtown, and I'm not certain who did the actual setting for the Shield. It wasn't me, however, because I knew very little about printing, other than that was something that someone else did. We'd run it through a wax machine and paste it up and run it up to Mount Carmel, have them take a picture of it, create a negative. It's like dinosaur stuff, you don't need to do any of that anymore. But the funny thing about student journalism is that there was a process, and the process usually meant, okay, if the newspaper comes out on Wednesday, we were putting it out until about Tuesday at 2 a.m., always at the very last minute, always kind of fueled by that deadline inspiration.
We use Cork Express, which the pages are already preset for us so we don't have to go in and reconfigure everything. And then we would take the Word document of the story and just copy and paste it into the page, and then lay it out by using different fonts and drawing picture boxes and text boxes.
I had total and complete editorial freedom. I never remember a word that was changed by Ann or Dr. Blevins.
And no one interfered with my freedom of the press, certainly, or my freedom of speech while I was here. And in many ways, that's why I'm still the liberal lawyer I am today, because of those 60s roots of freedom of the press at the Shield.
I think that they realized what the press was about, and I think the university has a very strong record of supporting student press. And at that time, it wasn't codified like it is now, but I won't say that with that respect wasn't a bit of aggravation to say, well, I wish you would not print this.
While Ann Humphrey never adjusted a word that I said, she did challenge me on the articles that I was choosing, types of materials, and but she allowed me to make those final decisions, and I was glad that I listened to her counsel and advice.
Ron Rote was the advisor then, and if anybody knows Ron, he's a crusty character straight out of 1960s newsrooms. Well, Ron was very hands-off, and those that know Ron know that he would be available to you if you sought him out and you wanted guidance, but he would not be down there directing the story or telling you how to do it. But what he did do is that every week the Shield came out, we would all anticipate getting the notes from on high, which would be a copy of the Shield that would be covered in red ink, And every now and then there'd be a comment that would say, great story or great lead, and that would be enough to encourage somebody to go and do more.
I kind of think Patricia Ferrier was a mom in a lot of ways. she was very, I think was just good thing about the journalism department, not just her, but we're real people campus. I mean, they understand that things happen. It's just not, why didn't you get that into me? I mean, I understand school does come first, but they also too understand that school is not the only thing that you have going for you. I mean, if you had a problem, she would talk to you about the problem, and if you had a decision, you're like, what should I do? She would talk to you, and I think it was kind of more like a motherly thing, talking to you, not as just a teacher, because she still had that relationship, which I think too, Erin Gibson had that relationship with me as well, that it wasn't just on a teacher-student level, it was as a friend level, it was a mother level, it was more than just that.
I think that respect, not just from, you talk about the administration, but also from an advisor role, to be able to teach and to mentor, but also be able to have the ability to say, okay, I'm gonna let go. It's gonna work out, and if there's a mistake or something, then that's part of learning, and sometimes I know that probably reflected on the advisor more than it did the students. But I think as an advisor, that was much more valuable for the students, for them to learn by doing rather than having the advisor do it.
I think I grew a lot as a person, not just as, doing with the paper. I mean, I've learned a lot. I think the editor position, you essentially learn how to run your own paper, and those are skills that you can't really necessarily get from a classroom setting, is knowing what it takes. I think it built me to the point where, I was here until 3 o'clock in the morning and back in at 7. I mean, it's just, sometimes that's what it takes, and I think it shows that if I can do that, then I might have the confidence to think that I do have what it takes to do this one day.
I guess it gave me a heightened sense of responsibility that you put words on a page. You can really hurt people, you can really help people, but whatever you're writing, it needs to be in a spirit of balance. You need to be making a point. It would be very easy to carry vendettas or sensationalize something. I did that once in a campus article mentioning a name, and it just hurt some feelings, and you just learn that, that really, it's a very powerful medium, and so how you exercise that power and authority and what you do with that power and authority is very important, and that you don't, it's not about scintillating articles, it's about presenting the news, generating opinions, trying to cover important aspects of campus life, trying to bring out things that maybe aren't going to be noted anywhere else, trying to be a voice for the students, those kinds of things. But yeah, it taught you to really be careful with the power that's been entrusted to you.
As somebody who just left the journalism career now in 2008 is different than it was in 1991, 1992. It's much different than it was even a year or two ago. So what I would encourage students is to not focus your attention just to one medium, not just say I'm a newspaper reporter, but to say I'm a reporter, because those skills that you have are going to translate to whether it be video, whether it be online, whether it be print reporting. So being able to assemble facts, to get the gist of the matter, to explain complicated things in an easy to understand fashion is valuable. So I would say the more you can experience various mediums, that's where the future is going, the better off you are. However, it's not going to start until you take a leap to walk into that student newspaper and say, hey, can I do a story?